Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome back. We're continuing our series, and it will be ongoing, quite frankly, because I'm learning something about this. I'm having pastors in now and then to just share with us what God's telling them, what they're preaching about. And so you're going to hear a variety of folks for quite a while here. And I'm delighted to have back with us, really, I consider a dear friend, Dr. Larry Jung. He's the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville, right in the middle of a vineyard.
It's a beautiful setting.
It is a beautiful setting.
I mean, especially now with the fall colors.
Oh, golly.
We have all kinds of people stopping to take pictures.
Well, if you look on the South Stage, across the vineyard to your church, and if the sun and the cloud's perfect, it is it's a calendar picture.
It is.
You know,
it's just beautiful.
It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, we had an artist from the church that painted a nice picture for Sally and me, so we have it in our home.
Really?
So,
Well, good for you. Good to see you. How you doing,
nice
friend?
To see you. Good.
Good. You know, I still remember the last time you were in several months ago, some of the things that the Lord was talking to you and you personally about, you and Sally, and I think your leadership about getting people set free in some areas. And that so resonated with me. And I don't know if that's the theme that the Lord still has you on, but you just went down to Fuller for a little seminar. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's I have my doctorate of ministry from Fuller, but I didn't during my courses down there. I didn't take this one class from Dr. Arch Hart, and he's a prominent psychologist. He's been around forever. The guy's 82 years old, and he's still clicking on all cylinders.
Wow.
And he's a great, just a great example and a great professor. It was a psychology class, and it was called The Minister's Personal Growth. And it's about taking care of yourself and how to go about doing that. And he was making the case, he was talking about how burnout is prevalent in the ministry, how so many pastors don't finish well or don't finish at all, how depression is twice, clinical depression, is twice the normal rate of the general population in pastors. And it was very good about establishing boundaries, how congregations can help with that. Ministers obviously have to take initiative. They have to be proactive. They need to take and establish their own boundaries as far as time and what they do and all those kind of things. But congregations can help with that also. So that's what I want to talk about today.
I want you to get it. Have you ever burned out?
Oh, let me tell you, back when we were trying to build that new church, that beautiful new church, I came that close to just quitting and saying, forget it. And the congregation, thankfully, recognized that I was close to just hanging it up. And they encouraged me to take a sabbatical, which I did, 3-month sabbatical. What really helped with that process was I applied for what's called a clergy renewal grant with the Lilly Foundation. Eli Lilly, the great big drug company, they have a number of charitable groups that they sponsor and they support, and the churches and clergy is one of their main groups that they support with their foundation. So, and it's an enormous foundation. I think the order of $8 or $9 billion.
Wow. So
they have tons of money. Well, they started this, in fact, I got in, I think, on the second year of it, where they have what's called a clergy renewal grant. And at that time, it was $30,000. And you apply and you talk about how it's going to help you, how it will help your church. And so I qualified, I won one of the grants. And so used that we went to Europe and I did a Reformation study there of 3 of the great reformers, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and John Knox. Visited kind of their places, and so it took my family, had enough money to take my family, had enough money to help pay for, it was Bob Murphy actually, who was my kind of interim pastor at that time.
Wow.
So Bob took my place for a few months and preached and managed the church. But the thing I wanted to emphasize was how important it is for pastors. If you want to keep your pastor on a long-term basis, they need these kind of times of getting away and just being able to get replenished and refreshed and all of that.
All right, I do want you to talk to the congregation, but I want to get back into your head a little deeper here, because I think what you're saying here is will help the congregation understand. Because when you feel yourself going down, you begin to question your faith.
That's right.
You begin to say, well, God, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
Why all of this stuff?
Yeah.
you preach it, you teach it, you actually believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you begin to question, well, wait a minute, do I have the right faith, or is this wishful thinking? I mean, at what point, how can I apply it so that it works? It doesn't seem to be working, and that somehow self-perpetuates this declining.
The cycle. That's
the cycle.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to stand up, you're supposed to be all spiritual, have all the answers.
Yeah.
Be transparent. At the same time, you can't be totally transparent because it may show a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
So all this is going on in your head and your heart, and you're just going down like that.
Right. That's where you need your church. Hopefully you have spiritual leaders in the church that can come alongside you. I did, and I had some of the older men in our church that were, very mature Christian men came alongside, and they kind of exhibited faith to me when I felt like I was lacking. And great example of godly men that came alongside me, and I'd go over and talk to them. They knew that it was hard, and they were sympathetic. They encouraged me. They said, it's going to happen. Just, keep going. So, without them and without this sabbatical break, I probably would have just left.
So what was the struggle? Staying spiritual and trying to be a contractor? Was that the struggle?
The struggle was not knowing exactly what's going on, because we didn't know. If you recall those events,
hey,
it's like
this.
I know.
I'm
yeah,
looking
it's
at this
the same kind of thing with you.
I started this project, and now I'm going, how in the world am I going to finish it?
I thought you were going to say, how in the world am I going to pay for it?
I got a wall, and now I got to put power in there. I go, what in the world's going on here?
Yeah. Well, it's a testimony to the grace of God, isn't it? I mean, it really
but
is.
you were $1 million, couple $1 million.
It was $5 million.
$5 million. Yeah. I mean,
for our size of congregation.
I was going to say, you're going to wake up and do a $5 million project?
Yeah.
Where was your brain? You know?
I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was truly a work of God. When you look at the largest gift to our whole campaign was $250,000. We didn't have any $1 million backers.
Yeah.
So it was just the whole congregation rallying together, giving sacrificially. We hired a Christian fundraiser to come in, and he had told me originally it was going to be a spiritual experience, and I thought, yeah, sure, they all say that, but he wasn't kidding. I mean, we grew more spiritually through that campaign at any other time in my almost 30-year history in the church.
But it was taking you down.
It was. Yeah, and a lot of it was the not knowing part. Okay, how much longer are we going to have to keep going through this litigation? How much longer are we going to have to keep at it with praying and giving and all the stuff that we were doing, and going through all these meetings that we were constantly having to go to. So it was wearing on me is the point. And that's not just with me. I mean, all these pastors, this is what I want to let the congregations know, is that your pastor is going through all kinds of things that he can't even share with you.
Right, exactly.
He can't, because, you don't want to...
A lot of it's confidential. I mean, when you're carrying
right.
the load of a congregation, and you know intimately their problems, and they've come to you out of confidentiality, you can only take so much of that. I think of Patrick Doyle, I said, you're basically a human garbage can.
Yeah. That's right.
It's just dump all the stuff in there.
Yeah.
You're supposed to take it away.
Yeah. I have people tell me all the time, I would never want your job. Okay, thanks. I signed up for this.
So, all right. Before we take a break, what did you learn how to tell your congregation to be sensitive in this area?
I didn't really have to tell them much, because I don't know if we have an unusual group or what, but they seem to be pretty sensitive already that things were tough.
Because very few pastors, in my experience, go through a building program and survive. Very few. Because, for all the reasons you just mentioned. But you did. And it's because your congregation sensed early on that, wait a minute, he's called to be a pastor, a preacher, a theologian, not a contractor.
Right. That's really true.
Or a fundraiser.
Right.
And yet some people say, no, you let us into this, you get us out of this. Right?
And I felt a certain sense of responsibility for that too.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to just leave them because, we've gotten part way. Sure, you want to.
Yeah.
But then, you're wrestling with all that. There's a lot of tension there. What do I do if we don't make it? if this doesn't succeed? But on the other hand, where does that leave the congregation?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
A lot of pastors don't go through a building program. They're just burned out.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't see the growth.
Yeah.
They're in this maintain thing. There's same thing Sunday after Sunday, week after week. There's just not a whole lot of forward movement, and it just kind of closes in on
That's
them.
right.
And I would say all the things you're talking about applies to that too.
Yeah. And I think what we have to do is redefine what success means.
Boy, that is so true.
You know, Dr. Hart was saying that success means being faithful. Faithful to your call.
Yeah.
To whatever God has called you to do, you know, and being obedient to that. See? So if we look at it more in terms of faithfulness and obedience rather than numbers, money, all those kind of things that most of us is very external, you know, where we can look and see objectively what's occurred. If we look at more of like what's gone into my heart, on the pastor's heart, and in terms of, you know, am I being faithful? Am I being obedient to what God has called me to do and to be? You know, those are the things,
right.
You know, and so.
Let me take a break. We'll come back, and then Pastor Larry Jung's with us. I want you to just talk to all of us who sit in a congregation. Are we protecting our pastor? Are we looking to that person, and maybe he's carrying a load and we just don't know it? It's time to just give him time away. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Dr. Larry Jung. He's pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville, and we're talking about, well, I'm having pastors in just share with us what's on their heart, what they're going through. And Pastor Larry just got back from a seminar down at Fuller Theological Seminary dealing with burnout, how congregations should deal with it, how pastors should deal with it. And I really have a heart for pastors that are in a squeeze. I've heard from a lot of them through the years, and there's so much. I don't think people understand the emotional pressure it is in ministry, you know.
Right.
And yet you're supposed to get up there and be refreshed and be theologically on target, you know.
That's right.
And if you divert to one of your subordinates, it's kind of like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of pastors that don't have a subordinate.
Right.
You know, they're in a little church and
he's got to do it all. Yeah. We went on vacation a year ago. We took a couple days, and we visited this little church, and the pastor was at the door handing out the bulletins. He ran up and down the aisle, did the offering, and jumped up and did the sermon. And I'm going, whoa.
Jack of all trades.
You can't function like that, you know. And the other thing is that you feel this pressure to be on top all the time, you know.
That's right.
And so, anyway, you recognize that your congregation sent you away for a while, which is great. But what can you say to the average person? And this October is a pastor's appreciation month. I don't know why we do 1 month, but whatever it is. But
we're in November now.
I know. Are we really? Help us with this, Larry. What can we learn from all of this?
I think that the message I want to communicate to Christians who are watching this and churches is that your pastor needs a break. And I'm not just talking about a 1 week or 2 week vacation each year. I'm talking about an extended period of time to go and get replenished and refreshed and renewed. You know, in our congregation now, we have it scheduled every 7 years. It's very biblical, you know, with the whole sabbatical business. And so it's in our personnel manual that ordained pastors get a sabbatical, a 3-month sabbatical.
Wow.
Every 7 years. And so our associate pastor, Richard Evans, will be taking his next summer. I've got a few more years to take another one, but I've taken several already because I've been there so long. You know, I'm part of the woodwork of the church. So,
yeah.
But I was telling you earlier how that really saved my ministry out there in Jacksonville. And I think that it can really help congregations. And you know, if you're part of a little church and you're going, well, our church could never afford to hire somebody else for 3 months and, you know, have this guy take off and, you know, do a special fundraising thing or something for it to help him out. But he really needs that. If you want to retain your pastor, you know, over the long haul, this is something that congregations really need to look at seriously.
And if you're thinking about that, I'll tell you what, I know enough guest speakers that could come into your church to fill your pulpit for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, I've done it on many occasions. I'll go in and take a church for a couple of weeks and help a pastor have time off.
And there are retired pastors here that will
There's
come
a lot
in.
of them, yeah, and there's a way to do that. So if you're thinking about doing that, don't let that be the reason.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
because I think if you can get him some fresh air into his sales, things happen pretty fast.
And pastors need to take some initiative on this too. It's not just up to the congregations. The pastors need to be willing to go to the board and say, I need a break. You know, if you guys want me to stay around here for any length of time, I need to have a break.
Are you feeling a more intensity of the pressure because of the issues that people are dealing with today in pastoring?
You know, not really. I mean, I think, you know, they're human issues that we've been dealing with for ever since the beginning. Charles Spurgeon, you know, the great Baptist preacher in the 19th century, he has a whole chapter in his book, Lectures to My Students, called The Minister's Fainting Fits. And he talks throughout that chapter, it's a wonderful chapter, about how pastors can easily get depressed, discouraged, you know, want to quit. And he goes into great length to describe this. He talks about his own experience, how they had that huge fire one Sunday evening. This is while the Metropolitan Tabernacle was being built. And, you know, it wasn't actually a fire. It was 7 ruffians that came in that yelled fire. And they had thousands of people there. People panicked. I don't know if you know this story, but people were trampled. 7 people were trampled to death. He was a very young pastor at that time. I think he was 23 years old. He went home and he couldn't get out of being so depressed. He really experienced a severe depression through that because he took it very personally that he was not able to protect these people, his own parishioners. And so, you know, gradually through his own deacon's prayers and through a period of time, he came out of that depression. But he kind of shares that in that chapter about how significant that was and how important it is for ministers to take care of themselves and to really, you know, establish boundaries and try to get exercise and all this kind of stuff.
There's a lot of things to read out there. I felt the conviction of the Lord over the last couple of months. Everybody's given me a book to read. And boy, you know, and I can't read them all, but I thumb through them and I do all this stuff. And next to my bed is these stack of books I'm supposed to read, and I kind of get into them and never really
That's
finish.
just like a pastor.
Yeah.
We get all those all too.
Oh, you know, and I felt the other day the Lord was saying, but you're not reading the book. So I just set them all aside. I had to put my nose back in the book. When you were in depression, where was God? From your perspective while you were there, you know now he was with you.
Sure.
But in that moment, did you feel like he abandoned you?
I felt he was distant. I'm not sure I felt abandoned, but I did feel distant. I felt a real kind of estrangement there, like you're not walking with me here on this one, Lord. I don't understand what's going on here. I don't feel like you're really close, that you're walking right beside me. And I want you to be. You know, I had some real, you know, as you can imagine, heart-to-hearts there with God, you know. And then, you know, by God's grace, we had these miraculous breakthroughs with the whole, you know, praying for the spirit of confusion to come over the opposition. They got the filing date mixed up with the Court of Appeals, and lo and behold, we win the thing. But, you know, that thing could have been tied up without God's intervention. It could have been tied up ad infinitum. Who knows how long? You know, Mount Ashland has this problem right now with people tying them up in court with trying to expand their thing, and they're just, you know, over and over and over again.
All right, so you've come through it, and you're looking back on it now. There's now, I sense, at your church, not that it wasn't there before, but it seems to be more noticeable, a really sincere, sweet, and yet very profound spiritual movement in your church. You're seeing some miracles. You're praying for healings. There's something going on out there.
Yeah.
Can you explain it?
You know, Spirit moves where he will. I mean, I don't, how do we fully explain the movement of the Spirit of God? We can't. But I think that the church did grow significantly. I'm not talking about numbers. You know, our numbers have increased somewhat, not significantly. But people have really grown spiritually.
But I know a lot of people attend your church, and they are spiritually switched on. It's It's noticeable.
Good. Good. I'm glad you shared that. I guess when you're in the thick of things, you just kind of, you don't really observe.
You talk to enough people, and you know those who are somewhat pious and those who are been moved by something. And I think they were moved not only by what you went through, but the fact that they look back now on a building that is paid for, of all things. My stars. I mean, that is a huge miracle for the size of your congregation.
It is, yeah.
So, your message to somebody who's feeling the tug on this today, what do you want them to get from it?
I would just encourage members of the churches that are hearing this to, talk to your board members about your pastor, about taking care of him, encouraging him to take breaks. Sometimes pastors get the idea that they're kind of, Superman. They're invincible. They can handle anything. And so pastors need to be very cognizant too of our limitations. Yeah. And the fact is that we're just human beings. We can't do it all. We need God's help and strength. We also need to realize that Scripture has this wonderful cycle of work and rest that we need to observe and we need to, adhere to. So I'd say both to the people in the congregations and the pastors, be aware. Be aware of what's going on.
All right, the few moments we have left, what's God telling you? What are you preaching on?
Oh, I've been preaching through the Psalms.
Really?
So it's not really anything to do with this. But it's, we've had a great time in the Psalms this year. Yeah, they're so uplifting, so encouraging to people. And people who've lost loved ones, who are dealing with, significant health problems, people who've, are struggling with jobs. The Psalms are such an encouragement. So last year, the year before, we went through Romans, which was such a difficult, academic kind of exercise.
Right.
And so this has kind of been such a switch. So, but I've really enjoyed this. I could preach to every single psalm, I think, but that would take 3 years. So
some probably think you are.
By the end of the year, is he ever going to get off that?
Psalm 88, is that the one you want to skip over that ends in darkness or something like that?
Yeah, there's a few that are a little bit, but not many.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. So, and what do you think the word is to your congregation this year?
This coming year?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to study the Gospel of Mark next year, and the whole business of, I think the theme verse for Mark is Mark 10:45, for the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So we're going to talk about serving and using Jesus as our example, as our model. So.
Well, Larry, thank you. It's just amazing to watch the whole progress of what you guys have been through out there, and yet you're through it, and God's blessing you guys. It's just wonderful. If you're looking for a good church, here's a great one. First Presbyterian Church there in Jacksonville. It's right in the middle of the vineyard. It's gorgeous. When are your service times?
Let me say this too. We are a member of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
I want people to know that.
Yeah, okay.
So Evangelical Presbyterian Church, we meet at 8:55 and 10:30 on Sunday mornings.
8:55 and 10:30 Sunday mornings and Wednesday?
No Wednesday service. We work on small groups, care groups.
Okay.
That's kind of our model.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Good to see you. Blessings
nice to
on
see
you.
You
Okay, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Okay.